Yo, Adrian, I did it. Rocky wasn't just a boxing movie, it was a brutal underdog story that mirrored the chaos of its own creation. Behind the gloves and glory, the production teetered on collapse, budget wars, broken bones, near lawsuits, and studio sabotage. What audiences saw was triumph, but what the crew lived was survival. Today, we're stepping inside the ring with 20 shocking facts about Rocky, 1976, that even the most hardcore fans don't know. From Sylvester Stallone pawning his dog to secret mafia funding rumors, these revelations will change how you see the film forever. And wait until the bonus fact. It's a twist so personal, so raw, you won't believe it. Let's step between the ropes. Time to go the distance. Stallone wrote the script in 3 days. Rocky's story begins with desperation. Sylvester Stallone was broke, unknown, and nearly homeless. After watching a Muhammad Ali fight against Chuck Wepner, he locked himself in a frenzy of writing. In just 3 days, he hammered out the first draft of Rocky. But here's the twist. It wasn't polished, it was messy. Producers saw potential but wanted a star like Burt Reynolds or James Caan in the lead. Stallone refused. He wasn't just selling a script, he was betting on his life. His ultimatum, no Stallone, no deal. That stubbornness nearly killed the project, but it also birthed a legend. What audiences didn't know, behind every punch on screen was a writer who fought his way into Hollywood with nothing but words. Stallone pawned his dog to survive. Before Rocky became a phenomenon, Stallone hit rock bottom. He was so broke he couldn't afford food. In a heartbreaking move, he stood outside a liquor store and sold his beloved dog, Butkus, for $40. Weeks later, after selling the Rocky script, Stallone tracked down the man who bought Butkus. The man demanded $15,000 and a part in the movie. Stallone agreed. That's why the massive bull mastiff you see in Rocky is not just a pet, it's Stallone's real dog, reclaimed at a brutal price. The dog wasn't a prop, but a symbol of loss, sacrifice, and redemption. Every time Butkus appears on screen, he carries a piece of Stallone's fight to claw back dignity from despair. The studio almost fired Stallone mid-shoot. United Artists wanted Rocky made, but cheap. With a budget capped under $1 million, corners were cut everywhere. When production ran late, executives panicked. Rumors swirled they'd fire Stallone mid-shoot and replace him with a real actor. But director John G. Avildsen sided with Stallone, fighting to keep him in. Stallone's performance was raw, unpolished, and not Hollywood enough for the suits. But what they called amateur, audiences later called authentic. Stallone stayed not by studio blessing, but by sheer defiance. What viewers didn't know, Rocky Balboa's underdog battle against doubters was happening in real time, off-screen, as Stallone fought to keep his face in his own story. Brutal injuries on set were real. The boxing matches look real because, in many ways, they were. Stallone insisted on full-contact choreography. He told Carl Weathers playing Apollo Creed to actually hit him. The result? Stallone suffered broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and bruises that shut down filming for days. In return, Stallone accidentally injured Weathers, sending tensions flaring on set. The bruises you see in Rocky aren't Hollywood makeup. They're Stallone's own battle scars. The boxing ring wasn't a stage, it was a war zone. Not acting, but survival. Every grunt, every wince was carved in blood and sweat. The famous training montage was born from desperation. Montages are now a Rocky trademark, but the idea was born out of crisis. The crew didn't have money to film extended training sequences. Long takes, multiple camera setups, too expensive. So Avildsen spliced together shorter shots into a single fast-paced montage set to Bill Conti's now iconic Gonna Fly Now. The gamble paid off. What started as a cost-saving trick became one of cinema's most influential editing choices. Decades later, training montages are standard, all thanks to a crew trying to save film stock. What looks like stylish brilliance was really a desperate workaround. Audiences saw inspiration, the crew saw survival. The meat locker scene nearly got Stallone frostbite. That unforgettable shot of Rocky pounding slabs of beef wasn't filmed on a soundstage. Stallone and the crew were taken into an actual meat locker in Philadelphia. The temperature was below freezing, and Stallone was in nothing but his sweats. He hit real sides of beef for hours, ignoring the searing pain in his knuckles. His hands swelled, his skin cracked, and he risked frostbite. The smell of raw meat filled the air as the crew's breath fogged the camera lens. What audiences didn't know, this wasn't a staged gag. Stallone was brutalizing his own body against frozen carcasses just to make the scene authentic. That thump you hear, it's not a sound effect. It's Stallone's real fist slamming into beef. The ice skating scene was shot without extras. In the script, Rocky takes Adrian skating in a packed rink. But the production couldn't afford to pay dozens of extras, so director Avildsen improvised. He cleared the rink, leaving only one grumpy manager in the background, yelling that they had 10 minutes. The emptiness wasn't planned, it was poverty. But what emerged was magic. Instead of being a noisy date, the scene became intimate, quiet, awkwardly beautiful. Stallone later said it was his favorite moment in the film because the budgetary mistake turned into emotional brilliance. What was supposed to be a crowd shot became one of cinema's most tender two-person dances on ice, not money-driven, but necessity-driven genius. The final fight was filmed in just over 28 hours. The Apollo Creed versus Rocky Balboa fight is iconic, but here's the kicker. It was filmed in one marathon stretch of 28 and a half hours. The cast and crew were exhausted, sweat pouring, tempers flaring, makeup melted under the lights, and extras in the crowd had to be recycled to make the arena look full. Stallone and Weathers threw real punches through the night until their bodies screamed for rest. What audiences saw as 10 rounds of glory was stitched from a sleepless, delirious shoot where reality blurred into performance. The fight wasn't clean, it was chaos. That exhaustion you see in Stallone's eyes, it wasn't acting, it was real. Burgess Meredith saved Stallone's performance. Originally, Rocky's trainer Mickey was a small role, but when Burgess Meredith stepped onto set, everything changed. Meredith brought authority, grit, and emotional depth that Stallone desperately needed. In early test footage, Stallone's acting was deemed too stiff, too flat. Meredith, a seasoned veteran, elevated every scene he touched, forcing Stallone to rise to the occasion. Their dynamic created the film's emotional heartbeat, that angry locker room speech. You had the talent to become a good fighter, but instead of that, you became a leg breaker. Wasn't just Mickey yelling at Rocky, it was Meredith pulling fire out of Stallone. Without him, the movie risked collapsing into cliché. Instead, it soared. The iconic steps almost didn't happen. The run up the Philadelphia Museum of Art steps is cinema history, but originally it wasn't in the script. Stallone stumbled on the idea while jogging through Philly. Director Avildsen was skeptical, saying it felt too touristy. Stallone insisted. They shot it guerrilla style with a Steadicam, an invention barely out of prototype at the time. The unsteady floating movement captured Rocky's triumph like nothing else. What was nearly cut as filler became one of cinema's most imitated sequences. Today, those steps aren't just stone. They're a shrine renamed the Rocky Steps. What audiences didn't know, without Stallone's stubbornness and a new gadget, one of film's greatest images might never have existed. And before we go to round 2 with fact number 11, here's your mid-roll hook. Go ahead and like and subscribe because just like Rocky himself, this video is going you the distance, and trust me, the next 10 facts hit even harder. Stallone was paid almost nothing. Rocky grossed over $225 million worldwide, but Sylvester Stallone barely saw a dime from his acting salary. He was paid just $20,000 for writing and starring in the film. By Hollywood standards, It was pocket change. The real money came later through sequels and merchandising. Stallone gambled everything by refusing bigger offers to sell the script, reportedly turning down $350,000 if he gave up acting rights. He stuck to his guns, taking a near-starvation wage in exchange for control. What audiences didn't know, Stallone's faith in himself was so absolute, he chose financial ruin over compromise. That decision looked foolish at the time. In hindsight, it made him a multimillionaire and cemented Rocky as his destiny. Carl Weathers almost lost the role of Apollo. Carl Weathers wasn't the first choice to play Apollo Creed. During his audition, he sparred with Stallone and accidentally insulted him, calling him a terrible reader. Stallone didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned in, seeing Apollo in front of him, cocky, confident, dismissive. Weathers thought he'd blown the part, but that unfiltered arrogance sealed it. Stallone told producers, "That's him. That's Apollo Creed." The irony? Weathers' off-script jab mirrored the exact energy the character needed. What audiences didn't know, Apollo was born not from polished lines, but from an actor insulting the writer to his face. The fight choreography was written like a script. The climactic fight wasn't just improvised slugging. Stallone and Weathers spent weeks choreographing every move, blow by blow, like a dance. Stallone even wrote it out on paper, about 32 pages of step-by-step action. Every punch had to tell a story: Rocky's persistence, Apollo's dominance, the gradual shift in power. But sticking to choreography at full contact meant real injuries piled up. The exhaustion in those later rounds wasn't faked. It was the toll of following a punishing blueprint. What audiences didn't know, the fight scene wasn't just boxing. It was scripted theater, performed with flesh and bone instead of stage props. The crew used family members as extras. Money was so tight that real extras couldn't be hired for crowd scenes. Instead, the filmmakers turned to friends, family, and whoever was available. Stallone's father even makes an appearance, ringing the bell during the fight sequences. Director Avildsen's relatives filled in seats. The budget was so skeletal that many shots reused the same people over and over, shifted to different seats or costumes. That roar of the crowd, often just a handful of voices, looped again and again in post-production. What audiences didn't know, the epic scale of the final fight was a mirage. Behind the illusion of a packed stadium was a patchwork of families faking grandeur. The studio didn't believe in the film. United Artists greenlit Rocky as a throwaway picture. They expected it to be a cheap little boxing flick with no cultural staying power. Their real focus was on bigger projects, while Rocky was shoved to the side. The film's meager budget, the lack of faith in Stallone, and the limited marketing all came from this indifference. When Rocky premiered, even some executives skipped the screenings. But then the word spread. Audiences wept, critics raved, and suddenly the studio scrambled to claim credit. What audiences didn't know, the film that won Best Picture at the Oscars was once dismissed as filler, not prestige, but filler, until it shocked the world. The Steadicam was practically a secret weapon. When Rocky charges up those museum steps, the smooth, gliding camera feels revolutionary. That's because it was. The Steadicam was a brand new invention in 1976, barely tested in features. Cinematographer Garrett Brown, who created it, brought it to the Rocky set. It allowed fluid movement without the jerky shake of handheld shots. The technology was so new, few in Hollywood trusted it. Stallone and Avildsen took the risk and created one of the most iconic shots in film history. What audiences didn't know, Rocky wasn't just a boxing film, it was a cinematic experiment. That run up the steps didn't just make Rocky a legend, it made the Steadicam indispensable for modern filmmaking. Stallone recycled wardrobe from his own closet. The clothes Rocky wears, the leather jacket, the hat, even the gloves, weren't pulled from a costume department. They came straight from Stallone's personal closet. With no budget to spare, Stallone literally dressed himself for the role. That leather jacket had already seen years of wear, and the hat was his favorite piece. This choice gave Rocky an authentic, lived-in look. Audiences believed this was a man from Philadelphia's streets because, in a way, he was. What audiences didn't know, Rocky's costume wasn't crafted by design. It was scavenged from poverty, stitched from Stallone's reality. The ending was originally very different. In early drafts, Rocky was supposed to throw the fight intentionally, exposing the boxing world as corrupt and cruel. Stallone rewrote it, deciding the real victory wasn't about winning the belt, but going the distance. This subtle shift changed everything. Rocky's defeat became his triumph, a moral knockout that redefined sports films. By rejecting a cynical ending, Stallone tapped into something timeless, the dignity of endurance. What audiences didn't know, the movie could have ended bitter and bleak. Instead, it ended in tears and triumph, giving cinema one of its most uplifting finales. Filming permits were rarely secured. Much of Rocky was shot guerrilla style on Philadelphia streets. Stallone and Avildsen couldn't afford proper permits, so they stole shots wherever they could. Stallone would run through markets, past vendors, and through traffic, while the crew filmed quickly before cops showed up. That raw, unpolished look wasn't an artistic choice, it was survival filmmaking. What audiences didn't know? The grit and realism they admired came from a production constantly dodging shutdowns, not polished Hollywood spectacle, but stolen authenticity. Rocky's legacy blindsided the Oscars. When Rocky swept the 1977 Academy Awards, winning Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Editing, Hollywood was stunned. It had been up against prestige films like Network and All the President's Men. Critics thought those films had the edge. Instead, a scrappy underdog with a $1 million budget walked away the champion. Just like Rocky himself, the film defied impossible odds. What audiences didn't know, Rocky wasn't expected to win. It was expected to lose politely. Its Oscar triumph shocked the industry and permanently cemented the underdog narrative, not just in cinema, but in real Hollywood history. Stallone hid his own real-life tears in the final scene. Here's the knockout punch. In the final scene when Rocky cries out for Adrian, the tears streaming down Stallone's face weren't acting. He later admitted they were his real emotions, exhaustion, relief, and disbelief that the film was even finished. He wasn't just channeling Rocky, he was Stallone, a man who had clawed his way from the edge of poverty into cinematic immortality. What audiences didn't know, the line between character and actor vanished in that moment. The underdog on screen and the underdog behind the camera became one. Rocky wasn't just a boxing movie, it was a miracle of grit, risk, and raw passion, stitched together with duct tape, sweat, and sheer willpower. Against every obstacle, broken bones, empty pockets, studio sabotage, it went the distance. And just like its hero, it proved that sometimes going all the way matters more than winning. If you loved stepping into the ring with us, hit that like button, subscribe for more behind-the-scenes secrets, and remember, life's not about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.